books that came out in the past 35 days of adventures, of 5th edition adventures. In the order of publication, this one came late. It ended up being published a month later than it was originally supposed to come out due to shipping problems. Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. And I will confess, because we are in mid playthrough of an adventure from this is the one of these books that I've read the least, but I have skimmed some of the other adventures that we're not playing, as well as the overall Radiant Citadel frame. But I think, Luke, you may be more familiar with this one than me.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your impressions of it a little bit?
Yeah, I've spent a fair amount of time with it, and I really, really enjoy it. To be totally fair, haven't done a ton of time with sort of some of these anthologies. I own Yawning Portal. I never got Saltmarsh, but this book is sort of speaking to me in a way that not a lot of like the campaign books or the other stuff I've read has. The Radiant Citadel in and of itself is just such a gift for DMs. It is this sort of idyllic egalitarian society where there's this faction called the Shield Bearers who can sort of go in and help people in need through these things called Concord Jewels, which are sort of facilitate interplanar travel. So it's just sort of like a great starting point for any adventure. And then, I think also when you have a neatly functioning egalitarian society, when things go wrong, then like that has more drama, that has more stakes to sort of fix things within the Citadel. And then the adventures themselves are super interesting. They each come with a gazetteer about the sort of the region that the adventure takes place in, which tend to be my favorite part. I'll actually, and I recommend as anybody who gets the book to start with the gazetteer before you read sort of the background and the sort of story beats of an adventure, because there's so much context there that is just makes it more rewarding to read them. But yeah, such a big fan of this book. It's also coming at a time in my personal relationship with D&D that is opportune. I've like just finished a long campaign that was sort of taxing on all the dimensions, and I really need something that's sort of short and I could do for a variety of different players. So I'm head over heels. I can't recommend this book strongly enough.
I will also say, and I mean this unironically, it is diverse.
Yes.
Like the tones of the adventures, like every adventure you're plunged into a different culture, the geography, the style of the adventures. There is something in there, and I've only read about half of them, but to please a wide variety of tastes.
Yes.
I would go so far as to say of the 4 official compilation books, Tales from the Yawning Portal, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, Candlekeep Mysteries, and this is the best one. It does have fewer than, I think Candlekeep has like 17 adventures in them. This one has 13. But all in all, I would say the quality is higher here.
Some of the later ones are really long. Like it's not like a 2 to 3 session thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Like,
I agree.
You can really sort of there's a lot of meat on the bone.
Yeah, there is a lot of meat on the bone. I really enjoyed particularly The Fiend of Hollow Mine.
Yes.
Which I think is set, it's sort of a almost like a Dia de los Muertos festival is going on. And the setting is called San Citlan. I really like the gazetteer for that.
There's a dungeon in that one that is particularly devious that I didn't find quite the same sort of like traps elsewhere, but it's just fine because like it's there. Yeah. But yeah, like thematically there are a lot of like festivals in the book, which are I think a good backdrop for an adventure and also a great way to sort of a great sort of canvas to sort of show and talk about culture.
I will say I did feel a little bit of festival fatigue.
Yeah, it definitely in the early ones. It's like, okay, in my DM brain, it's like, okay, how many times can your characters get like shore leave from their like Radiant Citadel gig to like check out another festival, Yeah. But that's it's definitely true. There's some of that.
Yeah. I think like the other ones though, I probably wouldn't run them all as a campaign like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, the ideal use of both of these is to like drop them in, either run them as one shots, or like if you need a drop in for your main campaign, especially if it's a homeroom campaign, you just need like a really cool, this will get me through 3 sessions and it's a cool location. Stick it anywhere. To me,
Yes.
that's the real utility of them. Not so much.
And they're
within
good
the frame.
suggestions for sort of like where to plug them into, Dragonlance or Faerun, and it's cool. They're definitely aware of that. And
if used that way, it's like, it's not like, oh, there's another fucking festival this week. It's more that like, I'll use this when I have the festival part of my campaign.
Yeah, exactly.
Deborah, anything on this?
I think it's been talked a lot about the diversity of this book, both in terms of settings, characters, the writers on this book in general. I think that Wizards is finally like kind of fine-tuning, is kind of like stumbled onto and really is starting to hit their stride with these compilation books. I think Candlekeep was the first one where they really kind of hit it more on the head. And then I think they really fine-tuned it and came up with something that's incredible with Radiant Citadel. I think these books kind of sometimes are underutilized. I think people really like their long form campaigns. And I think especially when you have a game that's growing in terms of audience and how do you build your audience and how do you get more people involved, having little stories or having little one shots that you can kind of just roll out at various levels, because as we know, level 1 and level 2, you're very, very squishy. But having that range in terms of levels and really being able to kind of say, like, we have a cool setting or we have a cool kind of like hook or something that we can anchor this book to, and then kind of how many different ways and genres can we kind of pull in. And I think if Wizards can kind of keep it going, into 23 and 24 with these kind of one-off adventure books, this is something that could be really, really exciting for just the brand and for players. Also, if there was ever a plug to buy a physical copy, the artwork on this book is extraordinary. I know we talk about D&D being like a theater of the mind, but like, man, the art in this book is great. 1,000%.
And it is, there's a lot of it. Like, there are some, I was looking at my copy of Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage. There's like a piece of art like once every 15 pages. This thing, there's almost every page has original artwork on it. It's really good. I will also say all 3 of these products that we're going to talk about here are products that your Dungeons & Dragons group will not have to commit a year or 2 of their lives to completing. And I think that's really good. I think one of these, there are some of these you can finish in 1 session. I'd argue most of them you can't. Most of them feel more like 2 or 3 sessions to me. Dragons of Stormwreck Isle is probably about 4 sessions. And even Spelljammer, 12 sessions, which is not a 2-year campaign. And I think it's good. I think it's something that 5th edition, needs to address people that are interested in shorter chunks. Matt, any thoughts on Journeys Through Radiant Citadel?
I'm enjoying what I'm seeing with Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. Like many other compilation books, I think it takes a lot of variety and packs it into a single volume so that you can, if you don't particularly like either the story concept or the art or the overall flavor of a certain adventure, you can always try another one. I think that's what Candlekeep Mysteries has in spades. Other compilation books, Tales from the Yawning Portal, etc., where they started all the way back, are sort of lead ups to what we're seeing now. And I really enjoy the overall idea that they're presenting.
Yeah, I heartily endorse this. I will say, I don't mean to tell you it's 13 awesome adventures. There are actually a couple of them that I was like, kind of like womp womp. But overall, I'd say the quality is very high.
Good to hear.
Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. Long story short, this is very good. Like the original starter set, this is the new starter set. The rulebook does not contain character generation rules. There are 5 pre-gens in there. Structurally, it's similar to the 2014 starter set with, if anything, even narrower rules. So it includes even fewer spells and magic items, for example, than the 2014 one does. A slightly smaller bestiary than the 2014 one does. Like with Lost Mine of Phandelver, the pre-gens here each have adventure hooks that tie into the adventure, and these individual quests are a bit more fleshed out in the adventure text than was the case in Lost Mine of Phandelver. While Lost Mine of Phandelver covered levels 1 to 5, this covers only levels 1 to 3. Oh, I did want to mention this. The adventure maps are in color. That is not true of either of the other two books that we're talking about, Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel or Spelljammer. Speaking of like the jump to the digital age, stop with the black and white utilitarian maps. Stop. I'm just going to have to replace them when I run them online.
It's just a money-saving tactic. I understand, but it's really
like the people on Patreon who are like out there making better versions.
Yeah, but it's like for a $50 book, give me a color map. I hate that.
I will just say, as someone who has to like photocopy the book, it's easier if it's in black and white because I don't have to deal with the contrast on the photocopy machine.
Yes, I will say, if I was running in person, I would actually like this because I can kind of reproduce them. I wouldn't feel pressure to even do that. I would like draw them on my battle map because they're just, it's black and white. I can copy a black and white map. But for someone who runs primarily online, I really resent this. Anyway, this one, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, does have some nice color maps. I would say the maps are similar in quality to those in Dragon of Icespire Peak, for those of you that are familiar with that book. It starts with a combat encounter, which is a much more survivable combat encounter than Lost Mines does. But then instead of proceeding directly into a starter dungeon, it moves to a hub settlement with 12 friendly NPCs, which might be a bit of a heavy lift for new DMs, but it's pretty smoothly done. And from there, it opens up into 2 major adventure sites. The quests for those are given organically by the NPCs, which is vastly superior to Icespire Peak's quest board, which was inexcusable. After completing both of those, in the order of the player's choosing, the adventurers are level 3 and they are funneled into the final adventure site. You reach level 4 at the end of the adventure, although the rules for level 4 are not included. I estimate it'll take most groups about 16 hours to play through this book. The rules are largely the same as those we've had from the start of 5e, but the sensibility of the adventure is quite different from Lost Mine, and especially different from Dragon of Icespire Peak. There is much more emphasis on role-playing. The personal quests often involve talking and bonding with NPCs, learning their histories, or discussing their philosophies, or what the player character's future or destiny might be. And while combat is definitely there, it's not go there and kill everything in the way that Dragon of Icespire Peak often was. There are frequently non-violent options and solutions, and very early on, the players meet friendly members of a traditionally evil monster race. In terms of viewing this product as a preview for the 2024 revisions, this is what's interesting. So some of the stuff in that UA packet that we talked about earlier is not like in here as playtesting, it's just in here. A few things. The monsters in the bestiary, which is limited, are pretty much the same as they always were. They do have typically in their alignments, which Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse did as well. None of them have any experience point values. In fact, the entire adventure is milestone, and there's no mention of experience points anywhere. Not in the rulebook, nowhere. Short rests are still there. We've been speculating that they might not be. The fighter's action surge recharges on a short rest. The channel divinity for the cleric and paladin recharge on a short rest. But the racial abilities look like what's in the playtest packet for some things. Like for the high elf and the wood elf, Fey ancestry just means advantage to save or resist or end the charmed condition. The magic can't put you to sleep business is now part of the trance ability that also allows you to finish a long rest in 4 hours. And that's in keeping with like a lot of things like goblins and hobgoblins now have Fey ancestry. So they get that save and resist to end charm, but they don't have the trance thing. That's just elf only. The Hill Dwarf pregen doesn't have the dwarven combat training and the tool proficiency ability that players' handbook dwarves get. Those changes are in keeping with the race does not equal culture philosophy of the playtest material. There are backgrounds. The backgrounds, however, look like the old style backgrounds. So they don't all have feats, but they also don't have the extra background flavor benefit like the folk hero who gets to, I think it says like they'll put you up in town because they know you're a hero. Like that stuff doesn't exist in this. And none of them have ideals, bonds, or flaws. There's no inspiration. either in the rulebook or in the character sheets. As far as the adventure goes, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle is hands down better intro to D&D than Dragon of Icespire Peak. There's a home base, there's 3 adventure sites, there's 3 random encounters you can use when traveling around the Isle. All 3 of the adventure sites are much more thoughtfully written and fleshed out than anything in Dragon of Icespire Peak. And each site has an interesting story, and the role-playing opportunities across the board in this adventure are much stronger than in Dragons of Icespire Peak. I'm not sure if it's better than Lost Mine of Phandelver. I would have to run it. It does some stuff better. There are more role-playing opportunities, there are better NPCs, there's a richer story, but Lost Mine of Phandelver makes players feel like they have completed this mini epic and gone from levels 1 through 5. Dragon of Stormwreck Isle makes players feel like they have done 3 pretty self-contained fun adventures, met some cool NPCs, and seen some neat stuff. It's probably 4 4-hour sessions. Lost Mine of Phandelver can easily take 10 to 12 4-hour sessions. The third and climactic adventure site in Dragon of Stormwreck Isle is the weakest one. There's a final enemy who could easily get curb stomped in 1 round by the recommended 4 to 5 level 3 characters, particularly if they roll first in initiative. There's a lot of ink spilled over this interesting ritual set piece combat encounter that, as written, most of the players are never going to see because they'll be able to prevent it from ever starting. I suspect a lot of DMs, especially more experienced DMs, will be tweaking that last chapter to offer more of a challenging conclusion. The 2 earlier adventure sites are really the highlight of the adventure, and they're both really, really good. I would say the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle is a good enough adventure that the adventure is worth buying the box for. I think the box is $20. And if this ends up being your first Dungeons & Dragons adventure, you're probably going to have a really good time. Has anybody else read this one?
I have not.
I haven't
but I've heard
either.
really good things about it, which is
I
really,
recommend it. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. It's not perfect, but I think it's a really solid first intro to the game.
Does it come? What are the
Yeah,
does
it's
it come
pretty bare
with good
bones
stuff?
as far as the ancillary materials that are in there. 32-page rulebook, 32-page, I think it's 32-page adventure book, a pack of dice, and 5 pre-gens, and that's it. So the ancillary stuff that you like, the Essentials kit came with a whole bunch of like condition cards and a DM screen and all, which was neat. Unfortunately, I thought it was a really inferior adventure. So this one has a much better adventure, but it is missing the bells and whistles. Also, interestingly, the Essentials kit came with the free version of it digitally, 3 more free adventures that you could continue, that you got access to on D&D Beyond, a 50% off coupon for the player's handbook. None of that in here. None of that shit is in here. It does direct you to some videos that'll help you get ready, and tutorials for the DM, like here's how you run this encounter that specifically are about this adventure, that are on Wizards website. Those are kind of neat because they really are specific to helping you run this adventure. So that's nice. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I have a feeling kind of with how short this is, how kind of tailored and kind of, I don't want to say pinned in or railroaded, but how little of the ancillary stuff there is. And because it was, I think, is it still only available at Target at this point?
Yeah, Target until October.
Yeah, I have a feeling that from the marketing strategy on this was less of a let's give a new kind of starter kit for D&D to our D&D community. And this was to put right on the Target toy or game shelves in their toy or game center, and to have some kid walk by and say, ooh, this looks cool, this looks fun, maybe I've heard of the term D&D before, take it home. It's literally almost more like a board game in that there are much more rules.
And I would go beyond that and say the impetus to even create this probably came more from the Target side than from the Wizard side.
Yeah,
I think Target was like, our starter set, the other one you made, sold really well. We want another thing to put on our shelves for D&D for July 2022. Make this. And we'll even pay you X amount of money to have this as an exclusive in our stores for 3 months. So I think for Wizards, it was just like, oh, we're getting some money from Target. Let's make them a thing, which I think was how the Essentials kit happened too. It was basically like Target came to them and said, we don't sell books. We sell boxes, but D&D does sell well for us. Your starter set sells well for us. Make another one.
So that's not necessarily a bad thing in terms of, if the marketing strategy works, all for it. I do like, at least, even though it is a more limited in terms of rules and pre-gens, I do like and I do appreciate that this is a little bit more balanced in terms of this isn't just line them up and smack them all down with encounter combat. I like that there's
a breadth of NPCs. I like that there's role play. I like that you have nonviolent options to solve problems, because I think that is sometimes an underutilized feature in D&D. But well done on them to, even if this wasn't necessarily a high priority item for them in terms of the D&D fan community as a whole, I think it's a much better introduction, even as a box starter set.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very thoughtful adventure. And like, if you're playing for action, it's absolutely got the action too. It's not like you won't get to do traditional D&D stuff, but like it has broad options for how you can solve problems, which is really nice. And finally, Spelljammer Adventures in Space. I just finished reading, right before we came on the air, I finished Light of Xerixis, which is the 64-page adventure that comes with this. And I've read, not all, but I've read bits of the bestiary, and I've read bits of the sort of player-facing book, which has some new player races and also a little bit of a gazetteer. I want to say, first of all, Light of Xerixis, awesome, awesome, awesome.
Oh, cool.
Thank goodness. I'm in such agreement with you. Thank goodness.
I haven't read most of it because I'm trying not to spoil myself.
Yeah, I'm dying to run it. Does it have plot holes? Sure. Do some of the things that it claims will take 2 hours probably read more like they'll take 45 minutes? Yes. But it is so, like, you can just tell it will be so consistently fun at the table. And the stuff that's wrong with it is so fixable. 64 pages is tight. And you can feel where, like, they may not have had time to do everything they wanted to do, but it's super fun. It wears its heart in its sleeve, as far as saying, like, before you run this, you should go watch the 1980 Flash Gordon movie, because that's what this is. And like, it completely is. And it's a blast. You probably collect a few too many allied NPCs that the book sometimes seems to forget exists.
You need them, though. That last battle is hard.
But there are some combat encounters where I'm thinking, like, well, where are the 5 people who are helping during this? Like, won't this be?
No, they come in with you.
No, I'm talking about throughout. Like, sometimes
see.
When it's like two monsters show up, and it's like, what's okay? I've got 7 people with me.
Yes, that's fair.
What are they doing during that? Are they just like cheering from the sidelines? Like, what's going on?
Hiding under the table.
One of the one of the encounters, I can't remember which one, but I think, well, again, no immense spoilers, but in one of the encounters, I do remember that one of your allies is so drunk that he sort of like spends most of the encounter just off to the side.
But there's like there's like there's like a hippo who's basically the captain of the HMS Pinafore. He's great. Mm-hmm. There's like a little homage to the Little Prince, which is really well done. It's really fun. It's like I'm very enthusiastic about doing it. The rest of the other 2 books, the bestiary is cool. It has its own sensibility. It's got some wacky monsters in there, but it makes clear what this setting is and what the tone of it is, and it's over the top, and it's fine. I love the vampirates. I think that's awesome. I'm really happy with the monsters. The player races are fine. I like the astral elves. I actually like the monkey people. They're like
the Hadozi.
Yeah, they're kind of like squirrel monkeys.
They have an ability that's a little overpowered.
Yeah, they have a gliding ability. They have a gliding ability that feels like it needs to go back to the drawing board with that a little bit.
Yep.
And you got the ooze.
The ooze people.
Plasmoids.
I will say this about the new player races, though. For the purposes of the included adventure, it's actually better not to have those.
That's true. Oh. That's true, because you start the adventure on your home planet.
Yeah, it's actually like and by the way, completely disregard that free intro adventure that they released. This does not take into consideration the existence of that at all. And this is such a better intro to the world of Spelljammer than that is. And much better paced and sort of hits the ground running in a way that one doesn't. But it does play better if you assume that the characters at the beginning of the adventure have no prior knowledge of Spelljammer and are just like regular D&D characters. Now, should one of them die during the adventure or should another player join, then, in like 2 or 3 sessions in, then I would say absolutely they could use one of the races that are introduced in this book. But for the first Spelljammer campaign, I would actually recommend not using them as player races.
Cool.
I agree.
So that players experience meeting those kinds of creatures throughout the adventure. Okay, here's what I would say is negative. I like the Spelljammer ships. There's some really cool ideas. I think they present like 17 different kinds of Spelljamming ships.
So many pages and pages of ships.
Yeah, they're really fun. I like all the different ideas of them. This is a recurring issue for me with 5th edition. Anytime they attempt to create like a mini game to handle all kinds of different things, wilderness exploration, chase rules, vehicle rules, downtime, ship to ship combat, they're not good. And these aren't any good either.
They're very half-assed, half-baked. They basically even say as much. They're like, oh, if you want to do ship combat,
it's like you're on your own.
Don't use the weapons. They actually say don't use the weapons that are on the ship because they take too much time. Instead, just wait for your ship to get in close quarters and then board the ship and use your spells and your normal weapons.
I feel a little bit like, hey, fuck you.
For real.
Like, that is a solvable problem. I'm sorry. Like, you could have come up with a system here. So that to me is the letdown. If you were looking for, I want to have spaceship fights, you're not getting it here.
I don't know. I think there is, and I'm a sucker for a hardcover book, and I'm a sucker for a new DM screen. But I really do appreciate that the new DM screens have wonderful tables for me. I'm a sucker for a table. I'm a sucker for, random encounters. I don't think they are used often enough in campaigns. I think that kind of the unpredictability of, wandering around leads to these sorts of, wild encounters. I will say from the science, perspective, I'm still not 100% on this gravity and the air situation.
The gravity planes and the air. I'm not convinced they even really understand it.
It's magic.
I mean,
it's like, if it's too complicated, just make it simpler then. Because I really feel like they kind of failed to explain it in a way that's going to work at the table.
The one thing I will say is that I do sort of appreciate sort of this, if you're going to wander through space and basically you don't even know where you're going by, thought alone and powering yourself through the power of, I want to be where I want to be. I think having these kinds of, ship encounters, astral sea encounters, wild space, your cargo. I like having all of this kind of thing that the DM can pull from behind the screen to kind of make this a little bit more. I like
the random encounters, and I like the ideas artistically. This is a lamprey ship that can suck onto other ships. Like, all that's cool. I just feel like when it came down to the nitty gritty of figuring out how this is going to work mechanically, they just threw up their hands.
One of the other things, and I know there's an enormous divergence and variety of ships. I mean, it is Spelljammer. You want the Spelljamming ships. But I'm going to be perfectly honest. I didn't see any incentive if you were going to create a campaign and you wanted to, like, let's say you start off with a crew of 4 and you start off with a small ship and you have gold from all of your Spelljamming campaign and you want to buy a better ship.
Or upgrade your ship, right?
Exactly. There's no option to upgrade your ship with additional cool shit. It's just like each ship is different and cool in their own way, which I appreciate, but they're sort of interchangeable. Yeah. There's no upgradability.
I agree. It's disappointing. And I think yes, Reddit will fix it. DM's Guild will fix it. Yeah. But that's kind of bullshit. Like, it says Spelljammer on the tin. I would expect it to cover Spelljamming.
It does. I think this is one of those things where, the book is where you start and then it's kind of where you take it. I feel like this is, and kind of like running through, especially in the Astral Menagerie, there is enough in here where I think everyone kind of thinks of Spelljammer and the cool colors and goes, this is going to be, like you said, by Flash Gordon, sort of like a movie experience. I think that there is enough here where if you have a savvy DM, you could take this in a really fun and goofy way. And I think you could also take this and make it into a space horror with some of these suffocation.
Yeah, absolutely. You could do Alien or you could do Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah. And so while I think, Reddit and DM's Guild will fix a lot of things, I don't think that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have fixed some of these things at the get-go, but I like that there is enough wiggle room that we're going to have a market to fix a bunch of things and come up with a bunch of cool shenanigans.
Absolutely. And I think with as fun as the adventure is, and with the monsters that they provide, you can have a very good experience with this box set, and I do encourage everyone to get it. And I think it's good. It's a good product. The player-facing races are fine. I agree that How Does He has a fucking problem with that gliding, but the player races are good. The monsters are very good. The adventure is great, but you pretty much are going to have to fall back on more or less your traditional 5e D&D doing what 5e D&D is good at, which is like skirmish level encounters with a few monsters and sort of montaging and narrating the bigger space stuff. Like it's all there. There's asteroids, there's flying around, there's stuff like that. But the book doesn't really provide a way to play that as a game. That becomes more of a narrative element until some third party provides it for us.
The last thing I'm going to say, which is a really good thing, is just the overall structure of Light of Xerxes, which is, I hope, something we'll see again in the future, which I think we sort of spoken out a little bit, in that it's broken up it's a level 5 through 8 adventure.
That's great. Like 12.
Huge in and of itself. That's, like, instead of starting at fucking level 1, you start at level 5.
It's not a one shot, but it's also not going to take you 2 years. Like it's it's a substantive chunk, but you're going to probably finish it in about 12 3-hour sessions.
That's right. Exactly. And that's like, if you do it weekly, that's like solid 3 months. I mean, if you want to introduce those in random encounters or the space encounters or whatever, that's a little bit more.
And it also covers the period where, a lot of people, and I agree, would say that that's when 5e is the most fun.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That sort of tier 2 area.
I think reducing the sections of the adventure into these sort of 4-page chunks, which is essentially the chapters of each section. Section 1 through 4, there's 3 chapters per section, and each of those chapters are 4 pages. So you can literally just be like, okay, I'm ready for my next session. I read 4 pages, I'm done.
To prep. And it does have like the Buck Rogers 1930s serial quality to it.
Yes,
where every single chapter ends with a cliffhanger. Some of the cliffhangers are cheap as fuck, but even that I don't mind. There's some where, like, this isn't literal, I don't think, but it's basically like one chapter will end with like a red dragon appears right in front of you, and the next chapter will begin with like the dragon just wanted to say hi.
Yep. That's true.
And then you move on.
I'll end this with saying, just like Grady and Citadel, buy yourself a hard copy, for the art. Someone got the memo over at Wizards and dumped this thing in 20 different vats of multicolor paint. And thank you to whoever remembered that there is a color spectrum and that you can use all the colors.
Yes, yeah.
Because the art in this is like the DM screen is beautiful, and the art in this is wonderful. And I finally think that Wizards has come to the conclusion that like the art is as much a part of the books kind of moving forward as the actual textual content. So, it is also a beautiful set of books to have.
Yeah, I will say it's trying to do a lot. Like, it's trying to be a bestiary, it's trying to be a setting, and it's trying to be an adventure. And although there are 3 books, each of them is only 64 pages. So really, like, the whole thing amounts to less than 200 pages of material. And I do think that hurts it a little bit. Like, if you look at this one Dragonlance adventure book, that is 224 pages long, and that's just one book. That's a good 30 pages longer than all 3 of these books combined. So while I do like the format aesthetically, and I do like the DM screen, and I do like the compartmentalization of the different books, I will say having an extra 30 pages here might have helped this product.
Yeah, it makes me wonder about how they're going to be doing that if they do that with Planescape next year.
Although Planescape, fortunately, doesn't have to try to include a system like a spelljamming ship-to-ship system would have had to do.
Yeah, they might go into Sigil a little bit with the second book.
I would expect the player-facing one will be some new races and Sigil as a setting. then the bestiary is obviously the bestiary. You got lots of planar creatures. And then an adventure, probably in similar length and maybe even similar style to this one. You know, like a 64-page adventure. And I
wonder if they were tied to that, if every book had, like, you know, if that was intentional, the 64-page limit.
It seems like
from a publishing perspective, you have to do it in 8-page spreads. Yeah. So that's why it's a 64, 64, 64.
Yeah. I do think it's the setting book that suffered here because of it. The adventure a little bit, but the setting book definitely. But anyway, that is a very long episode of Power Word Talk. Does anybody in closing want to say anything about Spelljammer?
I like Light of Xerxes, and I do see the problems with the spell jamming system, but it is something that I'm looking forward to the creativity of those on DM's Guild, and I can already see it with how to fix it.
I can't wait to run this.
It's super fun. I can only imagine.
Look, you got giant space hamsters. What more do you want?
Yeah.
Listen, I'm going to watch the hell out of Flash Gordon, and there are lines literally stolen from that movie, so hell yeah.
Thanks to all of you for listening. This is Power Word Talk. I still can't say it properly. Power Word Talk from Cast Party. We will be back next month with more news. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.